Welcome back. Today we are unpacking something absolutely wild, one of the darkest, most fascinating theatrical narratives you're ever going to come across. We're stepping into the eternal twilight of a kingdom called Lundaria. Now, the rulers here had an obsession. They used this controlled light to deliberately stamp out the chaotic smoke left over from the Hundred Years' War. They wanted rigid, absolute order. But the funny thing about total control? It usually invites its own destruction. And in this case, that destruction took the form of the jester's final performance. Let's get right into it. So, let's set the stage. Act 1. The Metaphysical Rupture. To tear down Londaria's rigid architecture of stasis, the uncanny jester, who's really the architect of this whole collapse, orchestrates a massive metaphysical rupture right from the top of a tall, jagged spire. And he doesn't just attack the physical walls, right? No, he goes after the very ideas holding the kingdom together. The scholar, the knight, and the king. The intellect, the force, and the authority. Now, it's crucial to realize that Jester isn't just some standard villain here. He is a brilliant subverter of order. To break the kingdom, he summons 3 completely chaotic spirits from that spire. The wit, the hunger, and the small. These are entities that aren't men, they aren't monsters, they are just pure chaos. And their one job is to systematically strip these 3 human pillars of their identities and literally dress them up in twisted, jester versions of their own clothes. Okay, moving on to Act 2, the 3 chaos spirits. This is where things get really intense. The takeover kicks off with the fall of the very first pillar, the scholar. Back in the day, the scholar was the refined, logical foundation of Londria, carrying the fire of high learning, speaking with the silver tongue of Christopher Marlowe. But the jester steps in and replaces the scholar with his first chaotic spirit, the wit. And what the wit does is honestly brilliant. It doesn't try to out-argue logic with more logic. Nope. It uses the jagged blade of laughter to completely shatter what our sources called gilded cages. Think of gilded cages as a vital metaphor for lost control, those suffocating, rigid academic traditions that try to trap human chaos, while the wit just tore them wide open. And you can practically hear the destruction in the verse of the wits. It goes like this. By the blade that laughs through the ancient wall, the scholar's logic shall finally fall. No more the verse of the stars so high, but the shattering of expectations as traditions die. Wow. It directly weaponizes subversion. It takes the beautiful, refined, blank verse of the university wits and mutates it into the terrifying, liberating sound of shattering expectations. The wit didn't want a new academic order. It just wanted to listen to the sound of ancient traditions dying. Next up, the jester moves right down the chain of command and claims the knight. This guy was the master of revels, the ultimate cold enforcer whose entire job was to bind unruly spirits and keep that architecture of stasis intact. But guess what? The jester swaps out this cold enforcer for the second chaotic sibling, the hunger. And the hunger had one main goal, to prove to everyone that absolute unbending law, yeah, it's pretty much an illusion. It's just a contract written in disappearing ink. What I find so fascinating here is the physical manifestation of all this. The knight's armor, which used to be this gleaming, ultimate symbol of state stability, literally starts rotting. It starts reeking with the scent of 1,000 fly wings. This decay directly represents the death of absolute law. It is the visual proof of authority rotting from the inside out. It transforms the grim, serious fortress of Londrian law into this weird, surreal playhouse where traditional logic is forced to suffer a really slow, extremely colorful death. Finally, we reach the top. The jester goes after the apex of the hierarchy, the king. We are talking about a monarch who is totally, blindly obsessed with his own divine right. To bring him down, the jester unleashes the third spirit, the small, otherwise known as the sovereign of absurdity. The small's whole purpose is to absolutely shatter the Apollonian gaskets. Now, if you think of Apollo as the ancient god of order, these gaskets represent the ironclad, suffocating mechanisms of royal authority. Just like the gilded cages earlier, the Apollonian gaskets are another powerful metaphor for lost control. They were meant to bind reality, but they're about to blow. And the irony here is just devastating. Under the grip of the small, the king's vaunted ironclad majesty is completely turned upside down into a humiliating spectacle. We're talking rhythmic stumbles and just frantic panic. The very theater the king built to contain his own shadow, to control the kingdom's narrative, yeah, it turns out to be a deadly trapdoor. Because of his total obsession with control, the king ends up stripping away his own authority. Which brings us to our final act. Act 3, The Great Clock and the Great Silence. To completely seal the kingdom's fate, the jester pulls his ultimate trick. He invokes the runes of creation and the rune of distorted reflection, completely tearing down the fourth wall. Through these runes, Laundria's circular playhouses are mutated into this massive, monstrous entity, the Great Clock of Hollowed Souls. And its function is truly horrifying. This clock doesn't chime to start a play, it chimes for a debt. It is literally counting every single heartbeat of the audience as the old world fundamentally rots down to the bone. The theater isn't mimicking reality anymore, it's eating it. And right then, the final player enters. The jester's loud, colorful madness abruptly gives way to the stark, terrifying arrival of the Obsidian Doctor. When the Doctor steps through the broken artifice of the stage, he doesn't bring more chaos. No, he brings the Great Silence. And as he arrives, he strikes his bone staff against the earth in perfect, eerie harmony with the jester's final, chaotic bell. But the Obsidian Doctor finds that the kingdom is already undone. The jester has already stripped away the theatrical artifice of the state, so the former rulers are just completely exposed. The king is left shivering, utterly naked in the violet frost. The simultaneous striking of the bone staff and the ringing of the bell act as a dual decree, marking the absolute definitive end of Laundaria's structures. The old world is officially just a hollow shell. And so we leave the upstart playwright Shakespeare standing completely alone in the ashes of the crown to ponder one chilling final thought. Was the jester's metaphysical rupture, all this colorful, terrifying madness, was that actually the cure for a kingdom dying of rigid stasis? Or was the Obsidian Doctor's Great Silence simply the final inevitable punchline of a massive debt they'd been racking up for centuries? It is a dark, unforgettable look at the real cost of absolute control. I hope this explainer helped shed some light on the brilliant architecture behind all this absurdity. Thanks for joining me.